Alright, so political mobilization movements in China and its impact on the development of the Constitution. That's my presentation. Before starting off, I want to make sure that we kind of understand what part of the article that I'm actually dissecting, and what change I'm trying to document in this essay. So I wanted to show off, firstly, how the word changed, just the way they defined themselves, the way that China defined themselves between the 1950 Constitution and the 1980 Constitution. In Article 1 of the 1950 Constitution, the People's Republic of China is a democratic state led by the working class and based on the alliance of workers and peasants. You see how it's a democratic state? In the 1980s version, Article 1 of the Constitution says that the People's Republic of China is a socialist state under the People's Democratic Dictatorship, led by the working class and based on the alliance of workers and peasants. Notice how the way that China defined themselves has changed, and changed from a democratic state to a democratic dictatorship, which is kind of a little bit of an oxymoron. How did that happen? That is what my essay/presentation aims to explore and define and illuminate a little bit. Alright, so the history of the People's Republic of China, the PRC, from its founding in 1949 through the late 1980s is punctuated by a series of sweeping political campaigns and mass mobilizations. These events, ranging from the 100 Flowers campaign to the Cultural Revolution, culminating in the Tiananmen Square protests, were framed by state rhetoric as necessary interventions to correct ideological errors, foster socialist unity, or stimulate development. In practice, however, they often serve to deepen authoritarian control. Following its civil war victory, the Chinese Communist Party inherited a fractured society and sought unity through ideology. Political mobilization was not merely a tool of governance, but a revolutionary ritual as a means to construct legitimacy through orchestrated participation. Campaigns thus became the CCP's signature approach to controlling both the narrative and the nation. This essay explores key campaigns between the 1950s and 1980s, analyzing how they were both designed to mobilize public sentiment while simultaneously limiting genuine political freedom. It argues that these campaigns ultimately functioned to consolidate the CCP's power by managing dissent and reshaping the political and social landscape. So, starting off with the 100 Flowers unit. The 100 Flowers campaign of 1956 invited citizens, particularly intellectuals, to offer criticisms of the party in the name of progress for constructive reform. This initiative, invoking the metaphor of a garden of blooming ideas, was grounded in Article 87 of the 1954 Constitution, which guaranteed freedom of speech. Scholars, teachers, and writers took the opportunity to critique the systemic inefficiencies and the abuses of power within the PRC. A telling case is the public denouncement of writer Ding Ling, a decorated author and veteran revolutionary whose essays in the 100 Flowers period criticized party sexism, cultural orthodoxy. Her critique initially attracted acclaim, but soon became evidence used against her during the subsequent anti-rightist movement. Ding was expelled from the party and sent to a labor reform camp, illustrating how participation in state-sanctioned mobilization could turn into political suicide. As Paul Bernard explains in China Perspectives, the 100 Flower movement illustrates how Maoist campaigns blurred the line between public consensus and coercion, selectively inviting participation only to punish dissenters. The legalist implications were profound. Xiao Chongmeng argues in the Washington University Law Review that the campaign marked a decisive turn in the CCP's constitutional thought, where law ceased to constrain authority and instead legitimized repression. The Great Leap Forward, that's the next one. The Great Leap Forward, launched in 1958, was the most ambitious mobilization in early PRC history. Intended to catapult China into the socialist utopia through rapid industrialization and agricultural collectivization, the campaign radically reorganized rural life into people's communes and set impossibly high production standards. mass participation was mandatory. The case of the Xinjiang prefecture in Henan province offers a chilling microcosm of the leap's devastation. Local cadres falsified grain production reports to meet central targets, which led to excessive grain requisitioning and widespread starvation. Reports indicate that tens of thousands died, and instances of cannibalism were recorded. Xinjiang was once hailed as a model of success, but became synonymous with the bureaucratic cruelty and mass suffering. Far from empowering the people, the campaign fused mass involvement with authoritarian micromanagement. Mao's Cultural Revolution marked a new height of mass political mobilization beginning in 1966. Mao called upon youth to dismantle the four olds and purge the capitalist and traditional elements within the Chinese society. Sorry guys. Red Guards were often teenagers, were mobilized to challenge authority figures, attack intellectuals, and enforce ideological conformity. The story of The story of Bian Chongyan, the vice principal of Beijing Normal University Girls High School, exemplifies the Cultural Revolution's descent into the mob violence. She was beaten to death by her students, young Red Guards, at the campaign's outset, becoming one of the first educators to die during the movement. Her murder, like many others, were unpunished and symbolized the cultural breakdown and moral chaos encouraged by Mao's rhetoric. While ostensibly empowering ordinary people, the campaign created an atmosphere of terror. Authority to now replace institutional governments. Millions were sent to the countryside for re-education. Others, like Liu Shaoqu, were tortured and died in custody. Following Mao's death in 1976, Deng Xiaoping returned to power, promising modernization through socialism with Chinese characteristics. His policies relaxed economic controls, allowed limited private enterprise, and introduced market mechanisms. These reforms were accompanied by a new constitution in 1982, which reaffirmed civil liberties. One illustrative case in the 1980 trial of the Game of Four was broadcasted nationwide. The spectacle allowed Deng to publicly distance his administration from the extremism of the Cultural Revolution, while reinforcing the legitimacy of legal reforms and controlled dissent. However, it also served to reaffirm the party's monopoly on political power, as no critique of the system itself was permitted. Although the political campaign rehabilitated many of Mao's era, including Chai Rongqi and Liu Shaoqu, it did not translate into systemic democratic reform. Sorry guys. Campaigns like the Spiritual Pollution Campaign in 1983 showed that ideological conformity remained central to Deng's political order. The student-led movement in Tiananmen Square in the spring of 1989 was perhaps the only significant mass mobilization that emerged outside the party's control since 1949, sparked by the death of the reformist Hu Yaohong. The demonstrations grew to include demands for greater transparency, freedom of expression, and anti-corruption measures. The case of Chai Ling, a student leader who became the most recognizable faces of the movement, exemplifies the movement's call for democratic reform, vulnerability of its organizers. Chai was forced into hiding and eventually fled the country. Her story, like that of many other students and workers who participated, underscores the personal cost of defying authoritarian authority in China. Despite its peaceful, patriotic tone, the movement was perceived by the China leadership as a direct threat to its authority. The crackdown marked definitive an end to political mobilization from below and restored the primacy of the CCP's monopoly on power. Although the Tiananmen Square marked the end of mass mobilization as a politically sanctioned practice, its legacy continues to shape governments in China. The campaigns between 1950 and 1989 established the president and the population could periodically mobilize to serve interests of the party, whether in production, ideological purification, or suppression of dissent. The CCP's model of political legitimacy became less reliant on legal structures and more rooted in the ever-evolving public performance of loyalty. Scholars like Perry argue that these mass movements blurred the line between voluntary activism and state coercion. This dynamic remains subtly embedded in how the government governs today. Even in post-1989 China, mechanisms of state surveillance, online censorship, and patriotic education campaigns reflect this legacy of mass mobilization governance. From the 100 Flowers movement to the Tiananmen Square protests, political campaigns and mass mobilizations were central to the political landscape of the 1950s through 1989. While these initiatives often invoked a populist or democratic rhetoric, they consistently served to consolidate state control, suppress dissent, and enforce ideological conformity, whether under Mao's radical socialism or Deng's economic pragmatism. The underlying strategy remained the same: use mass mobilization to orchestrate obedience. More than just events in political timeline, these campaigns represented the ever-evolving relationship between the Chinese people and the CCP, a relationship shaped less by fear, spectacle, and less by flaw than fear, spectacle, and ritualized loyalty. The legacy of these movements remain visible today in China's centralized censorship systems, digital surveillance, and curated political narratives. The campaign model may no longer take the form of roving red guards or political denunciations, but its infrastructure mobilizes, observes, discipline continues to define the boundaries of participation in the Chinese state. Ultimately, these campaigns reveal how power in modern China was constructed, not only through institutions, but through the manipulation of the people themselves. Thank you. So before I end this presentation, I just want to give a really massive shout out to Dr. Song for being really kind to me and giving me this extension. I was going through a real tough time, and I got to get my bearings a little bit and kind of feel a lot better before I went back into school. I really can't thank him enough, and I really hope he has a wonderful year and a great life. Thank you, Dr. Song.